In this video, we are going to be doing our first ever Call of Duty Zombies Would You Rather, and hopefully this is something that's pretty fun that we can continue in the future. But for this video, I encourage you guys to play along as we go through all of these different Would You Rathers, leaving your own answers down in the comment section. But regardless, let's not waste any more time and let's jump right into this first ever Call of Duty Zombies Would You Rather. Our first question is going to be, would you rather have the BO4 perk system or the Vanguard perk system? And these aren't very good, and they have their own unique problems for both of them. Obviously, with the BO4 one, they took out some of the most iconic perks of all time, including Juggernaut, Speed Cola, and even Double Tap, which isn't really great. But then they replaced it with an abundance of perks, right? So many perks you could choose from. But then they limited that with only being able to use 4 perks per map, which just really sucked. Not to mention that you had to predetermine which ones you were going to use going into that game instead of deciding on the fly as what you would try to do in that specific game, which honestly wasn't really that great. And also building in Jug and all the stuff that they did just wasn't great. And then you have the Vanguard perk system that has this really weird upgrade system. Like, I get what they were trying to do and I like what they were trying to do, but how they executed it was just so bad, because in order to upgrade the perks, I think it costs 52,000 points just to have every single perk upgraded in a single game. And then on top of that, the upgrades really aren't even worth it. It's just the standard ability, except slightly better each time. It's just not the greatest thing in the world. And because of this, and think about just which one is less bad, I'm sorry, Juggernaut, but I'm gonna have to go with the BO4 perk system, because that's just way too many points. 52,000 points just to have your perks figured out. That's just too much. It's not really fun to do, and maybe if the upgrades were worth it, then I would choose it, but at least currently those Vanguard abilities aren't really even worth it at this point. So because of that, we're going to go with the BO4 perk system. This next one is actually a little bit fun, and what it is would you rather have Tranzit without fog and denizens, or Die Rise with the PhD perk on it and available to purchase? Which you have to point that out because there is PhD on Die Rise, but you just can't purchase it for whatever reason. Either way though, this one is interesting because I wanted to figure out what the two worst things about these maps were, and I think these are them. And what happens if you just get rid of the worst problems with them, with Tranzit's fog and denizens and Die Rise's fall damage. And thinking about these back and forth, I really try to think about this critically, but in the end, I'm gonna be completely honest with you, just the idea of going on top of the skyscraper and hopping all the way down to the bottom of the skyscraper and surviving because there's no fall damage to PhD is just amazing to me. Or maybe when you're waiting for the elevators, you don't gotta worry for them. You just hop on down and you're good because there's no fall damage. Like, so many different possibilities that could possibly happen, and how cool it'd be just to hop around this map without having to worry to die of fall damage. It just would be too fun, and because of that, I think we gotta go with Die Rise. This next one's a little unique, and what it is would you rather be trapped on Mob of the Dead or Verruckt in real life? So this is you taking the place of one of the playable characters, and that's what you have to survive now. Which one would you rather take your bets trying to survive? And I think these two maps, in terms of their map themselves, are probably the two more creepy maps of all time. But then on top of that, you think of the locations. I mean, Alcatraz, it's not exactly the most ideal place to be, which is, even if you do find a way to escape the prison, I don't really know what you're going to do after that. Probably just go drowned, probably, because you're going to have to take your chances swimming. And then you have Verruckt, which is in an asylum, which if you escape, it's in the middle of Nazi Germany, so you're probably going to be shot by the Nazis, which isn't a really ideal outcome either. But maybe you take into account the stories of these two maps, which is actually surprisingly similar, because out of the 4 characters on each map, only 2 of them somewhat escape. I mean, the Weasel kind of escapes, but he kind of doesn't, as we saw in Blood Dead. And then in Verruckt, we had Dempsey escape, but he didn't really, because he just got captured by Group 935 and they did a bunch of experiments on him. So not really looking great in either of those. But what I think it finally comes down to is just the arsenal of weaponry you're going to have. And I mean, Verruckt really doesn't have anything on the Acid Gat and the Blunder Gat. Like, those things are just really powerful, and also probably the Ray Gun Mark II will be thrown in there. So because of solely the weaponry, I think I'm going to go with Mob of the Dead, even though you probably aren't surviving any of these maps regardless. Okay, this one is my favorite one that I have, and what it is would you rather have BO4 launch not broken or Cold War zombies launch with more content? And this to me is really difficult because I think these are two of the biggest issues with these two games. BO4 was broken on launch, so a ton of people hated it and completely dropped it. And then you have Cold War, which I think was actually a really good game fundamentally, but it was held back by the fact it didn't have enough content. And I started to think back and forth, which game in the end would have benefited more from one of these changes happening at launch? And honestly, I think I'm going to go with Cold War here. And the reason I think this is because I think BO4 probably was going to kind of flop regardless, even if the game wasn't broken. And I know that may be a little crazy to some people, but I mean, just think about all of the gameplay decisions that were made. I mean, you have the perk system that everybody hated, you have the terrible point system, you had the maps being overly complicated with especially their setups, and then the Easter eggs even more so, and then you had the chaos story thrown in there, completely ruining the end to the Ether story. Like, there was just so much bad inside that game that honestly I think it probably would have flopped regardless. Whereas with Cold War, if it just had one more round-based map, I honestly think it starts entering into the conversation, being competing with Black Ops 2 as one of those calibers of games, at least in my opinion. And because of that, I think I'm going to go with Cold War here. Our next one is, would you rather play only Tranzit for the rest of your life and that's the only map you could play, or would it be Dead of the Night? So only one of these maps for the rest of your life. And honestly, what I think this comes down to is if that Dead of the Night Pack-a-Punch quest would make you go crazier faster than Tranzit would make you go faster, because my gosh, dude, it's like initially you think like Tranzit is just such a bad map overall. It's going to suck if that's the only map you ever play for the rest of your life. But then you think of Dead of the Night, sure, it has more content on it, but the Pack-a-Punch quest that you're going to have to do every single game is just absolute torture. Like, that Pack-a-Punch quest is the opposite of anything fun, and you have to do that every single game that you want to play. For me, that's what it comes down to, and I've been going back and forth with this, and I think in the end I'm going to go with Dead of the Night for the rest of my life over Tranzit. And that's solely because, like, sure, there's a terrible Pack-a-Punch quest, but at least there is more to do once you get past. I think one day you'll eventually go brain numb to the Pack-a-Punch quest, and it's just going to be something you do. So because of that, I think I'm going with Dead of the Night. Now it's time for our final question, and what this is would you rather have Origins without the staffs or Dreisendrache without the bows? And yes, this one seems a little bit difficult because those two maps are so tied to their wonder weapons that imagining those maps without them just sounds terrible. Like, I couldn't even imagine Origins or the Dreisendrache without their wonder weapons. It's such a tragic thought, but we have to make a decision here. And honestly, what it comes down to, I think, which one of these maps' identity is more tied to their wonder weapons. And I think in the end that has to go with Origins. And because of that, unfortunately, the Dreisendrache, I'm going to choose you to be the one to play without your wonder weapons or your bows. Sorry, but it's just I can't imagine Origins, or I don't think Origins works in any imaginable way without the staffs. And that wraps it up for this video, and hopefully this was fun for you guys, because I really like the idea of this, and hopefully something we could continue to do in the future. And if it's something you want to continue to see in the future and more of these types of videos, then I encourage you guys to leave your own suggestions for future would you rathers that we could go over and have to discuss back and forth. And if there's enough of those, then I'll come back, make another one of them, except with your guys' suggestions. But regardless, that's going to wrap it up for this video. If you guys did enjoy this video and you found it entertaining in any way, shape, or form, definitely do all that normal YouTube stuff. Like, subscribe, bell, share, and all that great stuff. But I'm going to go. I'll catch you guys next stream, video, or whatever the heck it may be. And laters, guys.